Hey, you're listening to Soul Games, the podcast.
Where we explore new ways to enjoy the game of life with a touch more soul.
And a lot of fun.
So let's play.
Shall we? Hey, this is Brady, your host of a podcast formerly called the Unravel with Brady Toops, but that is now going to be called Soul Games, the podcast. How we got to this point, where we're headed, the stories behind it all is what this podcast episode is all about. I have my good friend Emily Capshaw joining us
Hello.
today. It's good to be with you. Thanks for being a part.
Yeah, happy to be here.
You'll get to know Emily a little bit later in the episode, but the beginning of the episode will kind of be a recap and a little sneak peek. Emily is actually my co-host on this upcoming season of Soul Games, the podcast, which I am super excited about.
Woohoo.
We won't jump the gun too fast, but you'll get to know her. And as my co-host, without you knowing her at all, she is going to just jump in and be the interviewer as we give you guys a little backstory of the last few years and the evolution of myself as well as the podcast. I'm excited to dive in and to jump back in to a medium that I found both life-giving and I found burnout and all the things in between. But I think what my favorite aspect of it was connecting with so many of you listeners and the meaningful exchanges that we had. And I'm hoping that this new season actually takes that to a whole nother level, creates a whole new community of people that are exploring life, themselves, and all the craziness that is the human experience. So can't wait to dive in.
Exciting stuff.
So Emily, where do we go from here?
So before I get into to interviewing Mr. Toops here, I give you guys a little character synopsis of this human in case you have not been a long time listener, if you're just joining us now, or maybe you have listened to some of the Unravel, but you want to know a little bit more about who Brady is. I'm going to give you my little synopsis.
I'm a little scared about this. I actually don't know what she's about to say.
And then maybe we'll give him a chance to roast me back. We'll see. So Brady, if you don't know, is an Enneagram 3, wing 2, and he is a Leo, which both of those things, if you don't know what that means, it basically means that he loves attention and
no
and wants to be super cool and successful and amazing, so everybody loves him and gives him all the love that he's craved.
You're not wrong.
The 3 is the achiever in the Enneagram. And yeah, Leos, my experience of Leos is usually big personalities, life of the party, and yeah, Brady definitely fits that characteristic. Will never turn down a chance to tell a good story and really give it all the juice to keep you hanging on every word. Brady has, in his past, he's had a stint as a pro baseball player, ex-pro athlete. He had some time as a musician, dropped some records, had a good run of doing that, and also had his 15 minutes of fame in a little reality TV show that you may have heard of called The Bachelorette.
Dun dun dun.
Maybe you remember him from this moment.
God. Most nerve-wracking moment of my whole life, by the way.
Yeah, so he's done some things, lived some life, learned some things along the way, and in the process of all of that became a connoisseur of all things holistic well-being and really being a true student of how to get all the juice out of life, live a good life. And in the process of learning all of that and reading books and studying from different people, he's become a quote master extraordinaire. You can always trust Brady. to drop a quote at the right moment and like quote it perfectly. I'm like saying an idea. I'm like, I kind of, had this thought about this thing. And Brady's like, well, as my good psychologist friend once said, insert perfectly applicable quote at just the right moment. That's like, fuck, that's, I guess, what I was trying to say. And you just nailed it in a quote.
Oh my God, I'm so dead.
So you can expect to hear that happen quite a bit in this season as I give my ramblings and then Brady sums it up in a perfect quote in all the right moments.
You know what? Speaking to that, I actually had to memorize Bible verses as a kid, and I think that might be where I got this quote thing, where I just for some reason, when something drops inside of me, I just don't forget it.
Yeah, clearly,
it just rolls.
Yeah,
until I
do. You got all the right quotes for all the right moments. It's amazing.
No, but it hasn't actually helped me from not being single. So I might need a new strategy. I was thinking that it might get me a girlfriend at some point, but I'm just not sure it's actually worked up to this point.
Yeah, you might need to try some other tactics for that one. But it's great podcast material, so there's that. Brady is also on the subject of lovers and singleness. He is a lover of cuddles, emotional intelligence, deep chats, and just overall loving attention. Brady is a retired old man's soul in a young man's body. He'll show you a great time on a golf course.
I did show you a good time on a golf course. That actually happened.
Yeah,
that's a personal confession there.
Personal confession. Yeah. I spent some time.
You did get a par, which I was super impressed by.
It was my first time golfing, and it started really bad and got better in time. I got some lucky moments, but
she may or may not have whiffed in the first dozen swings on the first tee. And I was like,
at least a dozen,
God,
maybe more.
What are we doing? And then the third hole, you actually got a par, and I have a video, and you were dancing around. You almost busted your ass on the green because you're wearing Doc Martens on a 42-degree day in Nashville playing golf. It was perfect.
Yeah, that's me. That can go in my bio. The girl who wears Doc Martens at the golf course and whiffs a bunch of times and then gets a par immediately after. Yeah, I spent some time visiting Brady recently and got a taste of his retired man's life that he lives, slow paced and attention to detail and all the right things. He's a hyper perfectionist with immaculate vibes. Everything is dialed at all times. And Brady's a fellow smart kid like me, cool nerd, valedictorian of his high school class, awarded most likely to succeed and teacher's pet, which is why we would have been friends in high school and why we enjoy talking to each other on this podcast today. So there's Brady.
We also would have probably competed against each other because who's going to give the valedictorian speech?
Yeah, exactly. So that's Brady.
I love that. Thank you so much.
You're so welcome.
I think. Well, should we dive in where we've been and where we're going?
Yeah. So now I'll kind of guide us in a little interview format. I'll put on my interview hat and get some details out of Brady, all the juice that you've been wondering. What has happened? Where has he been? How did we get here now? Why the change of the name? All these things we will uncover. So let's start with how it all began. Before you started Unravel, what got you there to this place where you wanted to get into this podcast? Why that one? Tell us about the beginning.
Yeah, I had been traveling, making music for years. And I remember I went on this retreat out in Montana, Big Sky, Montana. And we were sort of driving around on one of these plateaus, looking out across the plains. And there was a guy in the back seat. And we were kind of having one of these deep conversations, or at least I thought it was deep at the time. And we were kind of talking about life and God and how we saw all the things. And I remember sort of bringing up some subjects that at the time felt a little provocative, right? They felt a little maybe not the same ideas that I would have believed growing up, or that maybe where I come from would have believed, or the culture that I grew up in. And it was an interesting conversation because there was a guy in the back who was kind of saying all of the things that They were kind of like the stereotypical like conservative middle America, like Christian evangelical uh, culture kind of like token phrases. And then there was a guy in the front that was like very wide open and had a bit more of like a mystical stance, an open stance, and kind of like what we were talking about. And I resonated with him more because the guy in the back was super certain and the guy in the front was okay with being uncertain.
Mm,
And I just sort of experienced this interesting conversation that had so much nuance to it. And I thought, you know, I've been around like a lot of the guys in the back, and I felt crazy and I felt alone because the way that I'm seeing life, God, myself, the universe is changing. It's radically changing. And I didn't feel like there was necessarily a place for that conversation in the world that I had come from. And so I thought, you know, with all the people that I get a chance to meet, all these interesting people and all these amazing conversations I have, why not bring a couple microphones along and record them? And as a way to have conversations about interesting, hard things that, you know what, maybe we don't have to agree to belong. Maybe there's a level of connection in the midst of a conversation about all sorts of crazy things where we can find this resonance, and maybe there would be a place for that to be welcome.
mm,
And that's the journey I set out on. And there was also this heart like I don't want people to feel alone. I don't want them to feel crazy. So maybe other people are having these kind of conversations and they just don't know many people who have them. So maybe by doing this they could be like, "Oh wow, I'm not crazy. This is amazing."
mm,
So that's where it began.
mm. And in having all these interesting conversations that you had during the first season with these people, what's a big takeaway of what you learned in creating that season?
Mm. I think I learned that um, there is a place of connection that supersedes agreement.
Mm,
There's a place where hearts can connect, uh, and you can experience the beauty of another human that sees the world entirely different. And yet, there's this shared humanity, there's this
mm,
shared humanness um, that maybe we don't have to be so scared of seeing the world differently. Maybe seeing the world differently is actually what makes things more beautiful. And I also, you know, I set out to try to um, pose some new ideas, some new beliefs that maybe are more beautiful or less enslaving.
mm,
And at least ones that maybe helped me the way I would see myself or the way I would see the divine or another. And that was an interesting process because when I got to the end of season 1, I had a conversation where my mom actually asked me the 10 big spiritual questions of season
mm,
1. And these are questions like, what are you certain of? Um, Tell me something you used to be certain of. Uh, you know, like, what is God? What is the meaning of life? Like, all of these interesting questions. And my mom asked me these questions. And we had like a 2-hour conversation or an hour and a half long conversation where we just dove in. And I had never had that conversation straight face to face with my mom. It was really meaningful for me. And I recently listened to it and I thought how special to have that conversation recorded between
mm,
myself and my mom. And, you know, then when I finished season 1, like the idea of belief actually became less appealing, which is
mm.
a whole nother story.
Yeah. So after you finished season one, you took a bit of a break
Mhm.
before continuing on. So why did you take a break? What happened there after you finished?
Um, I just burned out. Like straight up. Like I was making this podcast. Uh I was like actually the difference between doing music is that and doing a podcast is that music I would make a record for like 2 2 months, and then I would go travel for 2 years to play those songs, and I loved it because what the reason I made a record was to like actually engage with people. But the thing
Mhm.
about a podcast is like I would spend hours and hours and hours in my room in a studio like making the podcast because it's a lot of editing and a lot of like alone time. And then I would put it on the World Wide Web and I'd get some messages and like I would have a few of you guys message me and email me and I really appreciate that. But I never got to see your faces hardly. And I thrive on the in-person sort of experience. Um, but on another point, like I was growing and evolving and changing, and there was a new me sort of coming to the surface. And after a host of conversations in season one, I was gearing up for like, what is this next space? Like, what is this space that I'm being invited into in the human experience? And I think it took time to kind of like recognize what was happening
Mm.
inside of me.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. I feel like that's why things happen in seasons as far as content creation, because there's
Hmm.
these moments in between where we are changing, and as we figure out who we are and what story wants to be told, those breaths, to those inhale moments to really recharge yourself to be able to exhale again is important. So then when you decided to
Yeah.
come back for season 2, what was the heart of that? What changed?
Yeah. Well, season two was kind of my journey uh unto finding happiness and well-being.
Mm,
I'd come out of like a very like a lens on Christianity or spirituality, which was mostly about belief. And
mhm,
um I don't know how much I've talked about this, but a number of years ago, I had a psychedelic mushroom experience that really opened my eyes to a whole new reality. And I've had some mystical experiences that I've talked about in the podcast that were similar, very
mhm.
similar. But it was almost like the world of belief didn't matter like I thought it mattered. And I think of it in the context of the Rumi quote where he says, out beyond ideas
Quote
of right
master, here he
doing.
is.
Out beyond ideas of right doing and wrongdoing, there's a field. I'll meet you there. When the soul lies down in that grass, the world is too full to talk about.
Told y'all.
And it was almost like I experienced a level of reality in the here and now that was so beautiful. It was like looking at a sunset. And in the past, I wanted to define the sunset. I wanted to tell you the colors. I wanted to tell you the why, the gases, the angle on the horizon and why it did it all. And I needed to name it and understand it. And there came this point in my journey where I didn't need to understand it or create beliefs around it. I think I just wanted to be with it. And it's kind of like that Walter Mitty movie, right?
Mhm,
Where he's got that last shot, and I don't know what it is, the snow leopard or something like that. This rare, rare animal, and he says, when there's a moment that I like just me. He goes, I don't like the camera getting in the way, and he's just sort of staring at this like rare creature, and I think something opened inside of me where I begin to take in life like that. And I realized all the ways that belief kind of enslaved me,
mhm,
even the best ones,
mm,
even the best ones. And it's not that we can ever sort of like get rid of belief altogether, but it just didn't matter is as like a front seat driver of the car anymore. It
mhm,
sort of can live back here in the back seat. But in the front seat, there started to be more experiences of life, like wonder and awe. And I started to dive into the emotional world and deep diving therapy. And it was kind of like, you know what? I don't care what I believe anymore. I just want to be happy. And I
mhm,
was coming out of burnout and I began to explore all of these different modalities and experts and experiences that were kind of built around transformation. And I was like, nothing matters unless I wake up in the morning and feel some sense of abiding peace and calmness and happiness. And I was in this process of kind of undoing years and years of suffering that felt kind of trapped inside of my body. And as I began to explore these various experts and modalities, and I started to experience some freedom, healing, transformation, working through trauma, and all sorts of various things and sort of unconscious patterns. Carl Jung, until we make the unconscious conscious, it'll direct our life, and we'll call it fate.
Mhm.
I was really deep diving that, and I thought, well, some of you probably are on a similar journey. Why don't I invite you along as well? And we had a number of amazing guests. Like one of my favorite conversations of season 2 was Dr. Hilary McBride, becoming friendly with pain in ourselves. I mean, I still listen to that and I cry. I'm like, that conversation was life changing for me. And a
Mm.
number of them were, and I even dove into some things with brought in my friend Diane Garvin, who's an astrologer, my friend Elena Dominguez, who's in somatic psychology, and a psychic medium named Frank Castellano. And so we were sort of getting outside of kind of this smaller world of belief from the first podcast, which had some amazing guests too, like John Foreman and Science Mike and the Gungers and Paul Young, who wrote The Shack, and all of these interesting folks. But then it sort of branching, like the road sort of got wider.
Mm.
And I got to the end of season 2. I actually recorded an episode with you, a conversation with you, like 3 or 4 years ago, which I
Mhm.
never dropped.
Mhm. Maybe it'll be some bonus content for
Maybe
this
it'll be
season.
some exactly. And I think we were talking about conscious relationships, but that was another
Mhm.
area that I wanted to sort of feature in that episode. But I again just sort of hit this wall. I hit this kind of point where I was like, I'm tired.
Mhm.
And really in my own well-being journey, there was this thing about like, unless I'm really taking care of myself, then what's the point? Like, am I going to keep like achieving 3 Enneagram my way kind of
Mm.
like through life, or am I going to actually begin to slow down and try a new way of being and a new way of relating to my
Yeah.
life?
So what's been
Which
going on in
then,
the gap
yeah.
between then and now? What have you been up
Well, that
to?
that kind of leads to this like formation of this thing called soul games.
Mhm.
And this was back in the spring of 2020, so a little less than 3 years ago. And I was talking with a friend, and we I was sort of conveying to him about all these different experts that I had worked with and people I had talked to, and sort of how it had helped me. Everything from like Enneagram experts to an astrologer, Diane Garvin. So Dr. Jerome Lube would be in the Enneagram world, and then Diane Garvin would be in the astrologer world, and then Hilary McBride, sort of like in the therapy, like trauma world, and all these different people. And he goes, well, why don't we do like a group? Why don't we bring in all these experts and do kind of like a mastermind? How we came up with this name Soul Games, because I was like, hey, dude, I don't know what the future looks like for me, but like there are a few things that I know that I get lit up by. And I was reading this book by Danielle Laporte called The Desire Map. And it came, you had to create like 3 core desired feelings that you wanted to feel in your life. And for me, they were playful, soulful, and connected. And so I don't know what I'm going to create in the future, but like, if it's playful, if it's soulful and connected, like whatever I do, it has to have those 3 components. And so we were talking about that, and that's where like the name Soul Games came from.
Mhm. Mm.
Uh, and because I love soulful conversation and I love having so much fun. So it was like a perfect fitting thing. So we did this group. We had 15 guys, and we did like a 12-week journey where I brought in a host of experts, and it ended up like it started right when COVID hit. And we were going to do it in person in Nashville, but COVID hit, and all of a sudden it became like a Zoom, like an online weekly Zoom session. And we ended up having guys from all around the United States because of that, and various friends and friends of friends. And it was in a time period, one of the most intense, wild, unique time periods of my whole life. It ended up being such a life-giving force
Mm.
for me as sort of this curator of the group who wasn't like, I'm not the expert, I'm just a curator, and I have a whole bunch of expert friends we'll bring in. And so we brought in a number of these experts from season 2 of the podcast, and it was phenomenal to go on this journey. I have a friend that says, tell me, there's the quote where it goes, I'm a quote guy, where it says, tell me like the 5 people who hang around the most, and I'll tell you what you're going to be like in 5 years. But he likes
Mhm.
to go like, tell me the 5 books that you've read, your 5 heroes, and the 5 people you hang around the most, and I'll tell you what your next 5 years look like. And getting regularly hanging in sort of a mastermind kind of context. With the mastermind idea is like when 10 people come together,
Mhm.
there's 10 minds, and you put them together, that's like one mastermind, and you sort of like you get inspired around shared journeys and collective. So we created this group, and it was built around radical safety, and a space to be seen, and a space to find solidarity, and a place to give support, and a place to grow and to be inspired. And it ended up being the most transformational thing I've ever been a part of. And
Mm.
I still stay in touch with these guys, but since spring of 2020, we did like 10 to 15 groups, both men and women. We would launch them sort of periodically, like a couple times a year. We did probably a dozen retreats, and had over 100 people go through the Soul Games experience. And I didn't talk about it a lot, sort of on the socials, just a little bit here and there, sent out some emails. But it was this thing that I was just quietly building as I needed, like I created the thing I needed myself, which was sort of this community of inspiring people who are on their path, who were open to exploring and evolving, who wanted to dive into the depths and the playfulness of life, and to kind
Mm.
of go all the way. And then this past year, I took a little break with hopes of kind of dreaming up a new creative project. And that is where you come in.
Mhm. So yeah, so why coming back to the podcast? Why merging the podcast with the Soul Games brand? What's the vision?
Mm.
What are you excited about? What feels alive?
Yeah, so I remember I was out in LA. Wait, I wasn't in LA. Oh, we were at your retreat
Mhm.
in Portland,
Mhm.
Oregon area, and such a beautiful time. Emily led this retreat called Eden Fest, and it was fantastic. And with all of these different workshops and experts, and 50 people or 70 people, staying in tents on this property, and like 2, 3, 4 days of beautiful, like ecstatic dance, to like guided meditations, to music, to like embodiment stuff, to like a tantra workshop, like all of these like incredible souls getting together. And I remember leaving that experience and going, wow, Emily Capshaw, she's amazing. Like she could get some shit done, and she can lead some amazing stuff. And it sort of opened up I mean, we've been friends for a number of years, but it kind of opened up a whole new way that I'd seen you.
Mm.
And I remember being on a plane ride, and I had sort of this, I don't know what you call it, but like some sort of thing that dropped onto me. And I remember feeling like you standing by my side, and us sort of talking to people.
The woo woos call this a download.
Oh, a download.
I got a download on the plane.
Oh, so I got a download. I guess that's what we call it now. And I didn't know what it meant, but I just knew that it was real, because I've always followed like my gut and the spark and that kind of thing. And so you and I kind of started talking about doing something together. And then slowly this fall, I was talking to my business partner, Ty Ward, and another friend, Michael Romero, who've helped dreamed up some things in the past around Soul Games. And they said, well, why don't we just start the podcast again? We've been talking about this for like a year or two. And I was like, oh, yes. And I think Emily Capshaw needs to be a part of it.
Mm.
So uh, Emily and I spent the fall of 2022 dreaming up what this sort of rebranded Soul Games podcast would look like. And it's been such a beautiful, interesting, wild, slow, fast experience, and all of
Mhm.
the sort of things. And I'm curious, I know you're interviewing me, but I'm curious, like, what has this process been like for you in dreaming up the new sort of rebrand of the podcast?
Yeah, it's been exciting. I mean, we'll get more into kind of what's been going on with me to get me here, but this is something that I really love, and conversations and like playfully chatting about different ideas in a kind of irreverent but also soulful way, and there's so much similarity in the vision of the type of conversation that we're both interested in. Um and yeah, I had also similarly taken a pause from podcasting for a bit and felt ready to come back, and so just it was one of those opportunities that came in a way where it was very clear that it was aligned and made sense and felt like a full body yes. So
Mm,
yeah, it's been
yeah,
super fun, super easy, super exciting.
I love that. Well, whereas the Unravel with Brady Toops was a podcast that explored spirituality through fascinating conversations, compelling spiritual practices, we've sort of brought in the Soul Games podcast with this description. While exploring the depths of the human experience, Soul Games, the podcast, is a must listen for those who love self awareness, pop culture, personal transformation, and the pure enjoyment of life, all while not taking it too seriously. Listen as we sit down and get personal to discover and experience new ways to enjoy the game of life in a more soulful way. So, as the main co host with me for the upcoming season of Soul Games podcast, I will give you a little character archetypal synopsis of Miss Emily Capshaw. Miss Emily Joy Capshaw. She sometimes
Boy, here
likes
we
to
go.
include her middle
Mm-hmm.
name. Also, I don't feel like I can match what you did for me because that was next level. That was next level.
This is the other thing about Brady is my intro of him is his totally his love language to just feel completely seen and validated that
I'm like, can we go back to the intro again for me?
there you go.
Well, Emily, she is a 9 with a 1 wing on the Enneagram, which,
Mhm.
if for those who know the Enneagram, is she's the peacemaker. And basically, in layman's terms, it means that she can stay in bed for a whole day uh, and never
Facts.
leave and actually be completely satisfied. There was a moment at Eden Fest where there were some friends, all of us were sort of in a room, sort of chatting, and slowly throughout the conversation, Emily kind of like, she's the only one on the bed. She's like sitting on the bed, and then all of a sudden, like her body just finds its way underneath the covers, fully submerged. And then she goes, "I don't even know how I got under the covers." It was like, the thing about the 9 is they love comfort, they love like peace, and like just being like kind of cut. She also is a cuddle queen,
Oh
so
yeah,
um
total cuddle queen.
anything soft, anything to be held in is definitely her cup of tea, which
Mm-hmm.
Emily's cup of tea is a sort of thing that she does on the gram.
Yes, hot tea with Emily. Check it out.
Hot
Little
tea
plug.
with Emily. Uh, she's also a Cancer, Libra, Virgo, which Cancer, Sun, Libra, Moon, Virgo, rising, as far as I understand. Is
Mm-hmm.
that right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know a lot about this stuff, but basically what I can say is like Cancer basically means she's super sensitive. The Libra is kind of the very helpful kind of way of being in the world, and Virgo is kind of the structure. Just the
Mm-hmm.
professional, gets some
So
shit done.
basically, I'm a softie who feels big feelings and wants everyone to be at peace and get shit done.
Exactly. Exactly. And she's one of the most creative people I've ever met. Like as
Mm-hmm.
a core human archetype, like she is full on creator. Um on a lot of different levels, like whether we're talking content creation or music, or we're talking like creative ideas or like business plans or like anything. We're talking embodiment workshops. Like she just loves to create and is as an incredible creator. She's also was a thespian. She
Mm-hmm.
was an incredible thespian growing up. So not just a creator, but also like a performer, actor person. And I've heard some wild stories about her thespian days at Baylor, where she went to college, and
Mm-hmm.
some of the wild parties that they threw there. And I was like, that is a lot different than my college experience. And I'm a little bit jealous.
Theater kids, we knew how to get lit.
Yeah, they got lit and they like to make out. So I was like,
Mhm.
oh, interesting. Um, like we said earlier, she is also a super brainiac, super nerd side. Were you valedictorian of your class as well?
There's a whole traumatic story of why I
Oh
wasn't,
no.
but
Oh
barely.
no.
I graduated with like a 4.1 something crazy, and there was like a requirement in my high school that you couldn't have a B and get and still be valedictorian. Like I had the highest
Uh,
GPA, but I had a B in a class and it was a whole thing and I was devastated and yeah, so nope, runner up.
Tell me who to talk to. We're gonna get that taken care of. Hey, I got a B in college. It was my only B ever, so I know the trauma.
Mhm.
Uh, I don't know this side super well about Emily, but she apparently says that she's very gullible and she's the naive one.
Mhm.
I have gotten her on a few like sort of dry jokes,
Mhm.
so I can see how that's a possible. But another interesting thing is that she says she's openly queer and open to talk about it. Basically, that means hot girls ask her out all the time, as they just recently
As of
did this
late.
weekend. She's a magnet for hot girls just asking her out. And I'm gonna sign up for her masterclass because I'm gonna try to figure out how to get hot girls to ask me out as well. But openly queer, I guess, also means that you like guys and you like girls. I don't know. You can
Mhm.
sort of jump in. I'm sure
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, I think on that note, it's um, queer would be the label I would use, but I'm pretty open to any of them because for me, I think I've always known that I've been into girls from a young age. And as I've gotten older and there's like more and more letters getting added to the LGBTQIA, this, that,
Mm,
plus all the letters of the alphabet,
mhm.
it's kind of to me, I'm like, all right, at what point are we going to stop putting like boxes and lines around something as fluid as sexuality?
Yeah.
Because we're talking about attraction and desire, and that's something that's alive in the moment and in the body and dependent on so many factors and can change in so many moments. And as people are starting to identify as like non-binary and trans and like all these different
Mm,
less black and white identities, then even to be like gay or straight seems kind of silly because it's like, well, if there's a vibe and there's an attraction, and for me that's a lot based on energy more than anything between somebody, then it's there. And
mm,
I don't need to define that based on things like genitalia or gender identity or
mm,
anything like that. It's like if I'm down, I'm down, and if I'm not, I'm not. Like even
mm,
people who identify as straight, to me, there's like, well, yeah, I could be like, oh, I like men, but not all men. There's still preference within that.
mhm.
You know, you like some men in certain moments if the vibe's there. So to me, I think sexuality is super, super fluid, and I experience as really fluid. So that's me.
I love that. She is also kind of a self-proclaimed guru, sage, teacher,
I don't know about
clarifier.
that.
Basically,
Self-proclaimed guru? No.
I just had to get you. I had to get you just a little bit. That's not like totally. Actually, it's Brady proclaimed that she is a guru. She had, she does joke around about being the smartest person in the room. I've actually heard you say that like one time. Um,
I
and
doubt that too. Joking.
or at least she's got a high horse she get on at some points in a sort of a fun kind of way. But I don't know. My horse is probably higher. So like I'm probably projecting fully onto her. But I will say this about Emily Capshaw. I have really loved our friendship over the last number of years. You are always an inspiring soul. You are always diving into exploring something and like whether it's life or reading or workshops. And it's been such a joy and a delight to be inspired by your life. And I've really enjoyed this process of sort of diving in further together on this project and having it as an excuse for us um, to hang out more. So
Yeah.
as a way for people to get like beyond my caricature of you, which is like somewhat accurate, somewhat also like a very budding golfer, you know, as we talked about
Uh-huh.
earlier. A lot of promise, a lot of promise.
A lot of promise.
What what have you been doing for 31 years?
Easy question to get us
Yeah,
started.
yeah. Like what have you been up to for like the last like 3 decades since you were born?
All kinds of things, a lot.
maybe a few highlights.
Yeah. Actually, I've done a lot of kind of similar to you, a wide
Mm,
variety of different endeavors in those
mm,
years where sometimes when I'm getting to know people, they're like, how old are you again? When did you have time
mm,
to do all this shit?
mhm,
Because I
mhm,
was really bouncing around trying all kinds of different things. But yeah, I grew up in a Christian home with missionary worship leader parents, grew up around music and church and all of that stuff. And there was a lot of beauty about that, and also some things that left me feeling really alone in my own head and misunderstood,
mm,
mostly due to my own experiencing myself as someone queer and someone with some mental health struggles, and
mm,
not really being in an environment that talked about either of those things or made sense of them. So I felt kind of like a weirdo in a strange land. Um,
mm.
a lot of my younger years. And then once I went off to college and went to a Christian college, that's when it really crashed and burned. And I was like, I don't believe any of this shit. And I don't know
Mm,
what the point of living is. And
mm.
I don't know why I'm here. And I really dropped into a deep, deep depression during
Do you
that
know
time.
what some of the factors were, you think, of why you started to be like, I don't believe any of this, and like why the depression sort of came
I
on? Can
think it
you
was just
pinpoint it?
the environment shift of like moving out of my family home and really
Mm,
being pushed at that time as like an 18-year-old going off into the world, of like, who am I and what
mm,
do I think? Do I want to go to
mm,
church still? Like things like
mhm,
that. And just really starting to realize like how much of my environment was me just going along with what the family does,
mm,
and starting to really question those things. And my my Christian faith was like so fundamental to my understanding of the world and how it works. So for that to
mm,
just kind of dissolve, it just left me feeling I was just like, what do I grasp onto? Like,
mm,
what do I make sense? How do I make sense of all this? And so I kind of threw the baby out with the bath water in a sense where it was like, there was some helpful things for my mental health and my sense of purpose and drive and well-being that also I lost at that time
mm. Yeah, things
and was
like
drowning.
some sense of like connection to the divine, I would assume, and like
Yeah,
some sense of
community.
meaning, community, right?
Hmm.
And when that sort of way of seeing the world disbanded, like all of that disbanded as well, and like that's a very destabilizing time.
Yeah, even the simplest things of like singing in a group with other people, like group singing, like things like that,
Mm.
that were practices that were helping me that I didn't even know were until I didn't have them anymore. I was also like drinking super heavily and like on
Mm,
antidepressants and anti-anxiety medication and like
mm,
working 3 jobs to put myself through school and like not
mm.
sleeping, drinking like 6 Red Bulls a day. It was a low point as far as just not knowing how to take care of myself,
Yeah.
and not realizing the impact that that was having on my
Mm,
mental well-being.
yeah.
So that low really was the beginning point of me starting to figure out like, okay, yeah, something's got to change, and like diving into exploring well-being practices without
Mm,
religion attached to it.
mm,
And so that was the moment that I started discovering meditation and yoga and
mm,
like listening to podcasts and reading books
mm,
on how to take better care of myself, really was
mm,
kind of the gateway drug for me into a sort of spiritual exploration path. And that led me into really diving into Eastern religions, and studying Buddhism and studying Hinduism and like traveling the world and spending some time in Thailand at a Buddhist monastery and going to India to study yoga and like really trying to figure out, still in a very seeker way, like, okay, it's not Christianity, but it must be one of these other ones. So like, which is
Mm.
it? And
Which one's true? Like one of
yeah,
these has
which
got to
one's
be
true?
true.
Exactly. Like really in that zone. And um yeah, eventually landed in a place of letting go of all of that and seeing that they were all kind of pointing at the same thing and like different metaphors and stories and literally sometimes the same fucking stories like in the Bhagavad Gita and the Bible, and it's like this is the same story, different
Yeah.
characters. So realizing it
Mhm.
was all pointing to the same thing, and um yeah, now I feel like I'm at a place where I'm more concerned with what's supporting me in the present moment to be deeper in acceptance and love and enjoyment and pleasure and in my body. um that's really what I'm interested in more than
Mm.
thoughts or ideas or beliefs.
Mm.
But even for a while it was like, oh, then practice, I choose practices over beliefs, but now I don't even really have like, I'm not a practice junkie like I used to be even.
Yeah.
So there's been a lot of different seasons and
Mm.
evolving through all of that and learning to integrate everything from before and not judging any of those versions of me
Mm.
or those stages and seeing how they all played a part. Now I would kind of describe my current season as like I've left the um renunciation spiritual path of like I'm going to meditate and not have desire and be just in samadhi all the time, like kind of letting go of that and actually being like, you know what, I'm a human being right now and I'm going to enjoy human things and I'm going to be in my body and I'm going to fall deeply in love with everything, like the taste of this
Mm.
food right now, like
Mm.
this dance party that I'm at, like, and just not worry too much about the duality and the morality of like, is this right or wrong, or does this make me good or bad or okay, but really leaning into the fact that this is my human experience and I'm the creator of it, and
Mm.
all of that judgment is just mental story, and like how deeply can I love what is, knowing
Mm.
that it's all going to go away and I'm going to have to let it all go, but like while it's here, can I really really love it all? So
Mm.
that's kind of where I've landed.
Well, thank you for giving us the background of sort of like your evolution as a human and like through all the different seasons. I think it would be interesting for the listener to know a little bit more about like your kind of career path and sort of some
Yeah.
other things that you sort of done on that. Because I know you traveled, you were like did music, like you like did like the sound engineering sort of things for
Hmm.
a while, and you tour managed, and then you moved in and then you sort of blew up on TikTok. And anyway, can you give it
Yeah.
like give the listeners a little bit of background about you kind of in a professional sense that would kind of give
Yes.
a full picture of who is Emily Capshaw
Yeah.
in that
So
sense?
meanwhile, all these existential crises and seeking is happening. On the surface level, I went to school for acting. I got my degree in acting, and always had the plan of like moving either to New York or LA to pursue that. But while I was in college, I started working at a music venue, and that's when I started getting into mixing. And then I was like booking artists and managing this venue and got a bunch of connections in the music industry. And I actually got offered by a label to move to Nashville, and work with some of their artists. Ended up turning that down to still move to LA and pursue acting. But that really opened this door of the music industry that became a big part of my 20s as well. So I spent the earlier part of my 20s doing a lot of acting work, booked a couple pilots that never got picked up. Oh, you had a
The crazy
follow-up
thing I was
question?
gonna say about that, the place where you worked in Waco, it's
Uh-huh.
called Common Grounds, and I've played a couple of shows at Common Grounds. I actually think I
Yeah.
passed through maybe a year or two after you left Common
Hmm.
Grounds, so
Yeah, we
uh,
missed each other there.
just by a second. So anyway, off to LA,
Yeah,
into
so
acting.
off to LA, did a bunch of commercials, did a bunch of like smaller roles and auditioning, and realized like really quickly that though I loved acting, the actual career path of the actor
Mm.
was way too disempowered for me to just live my life waiting for other people to give me opportunities and not have any control over what I was doing, and feeling like I needed to be grateful for whatever came my way, whether I liked it or not, wasn't really for me. Because, like you said, I'm a total creator. Like, I have my own ideas plaguing me day in and day out. So, um, yeah, I kind of shifted away from that pretty quickly after maybe 3-4 years out here, and then started putting a lot more energy into the music stuff because a lot of opportunities were coming there to tour and work with different artists. And so I spent quite a bit of my 20s on the road, tour managing and mixing different artists. The last big tour that I did was Kendrick Lamar's Damn tour in 2017.
Damn, girl.
Damn.
Damn.
That was fun. So yeah, I had a stint there working in like the hip hop world with a bunch of different rappers and have like all kinds of crazy stories. Maybe some of them will pop out here and there throughout the podcast of like being in buses full of like hip hop dudes and like working with an active Crip who like carried a piece on him and paid me in cash. Like just so much crazy shit.
Get out of here. Like,
Yeah.
you've told me a few stories, like meeting Chance the Rapper and like
Mm-hmm.
meeting, I don't remember
Mm-hmm.
who are some of the other artists you met, but some big, big,
Yeah, I've
big
met a lot of
artists.
big artists, which really dissolved the illusion of like celebrity to me
Mm,
during that time. Um, yeah, it just started to feel not that exciting anymore after a bit of like famous
mm,
people.
mm,
Um, but I always really admired the level of dedication to your craft that it takes to hit that level of success, and that was really cool to be around and really inspiring for me, and kind of the reason why I ended up quitting that to pursue my own creative endeavors, because I was like, this is really cool and I'm meeting cool people and doing all kinds of amazing opportunities and I'm getting paid really well, and it was a very cool thing to do, to like be on tour all the time. But I burned out and it wasn't creative enough for me. I had all these ideas coming through all the time that I wanted to
mm,
um like stories that I wanted to write and films I wanted to produce, and I
mm,
wanted to create my own music. I was deeply insecure about it.
mm, mm,
But the reason I was in that role for so long was because I loved music so much. I wanted to be around it in any way I could, but I was working with all these A-list celebrities. So I was like, how the fuck could I do this? Like it just
mm,
really created this complex where I just felt like daunted by it. And then COVID hit. Um, and I took that, all the tours went away and I was wanting to kind of quit anyway.
mm.
And I I had already kind of started a bit of a YouTube channel and some online stuff, but I was like, all right, this is the time to really double down on this. And so at that time, I was making like 3 TikTok videos a day and weekly YouTubes and like just going hard in the content
What were
creation.
you making the videos about? Like, what was your thing?
A lot of it was like mental health and well-being, like sharing some of my own experiences of what helped me with my mental health. And at that time, everybody was struggling with their mental health with lockdown
Hmm.
happening. And so I just kind of hit that at the right time, I think. Um, and yeah, I was really enjoying that. It felt like a good combination of all these different skills that I had picked up, um, like production skills and being able to shoot all my own content and feel in control of it, and like really went hard on that. And then the TikTok started to kind of blow up because of that. Nobody at the time was really doing anything in the well-being niche. No one was even really doing talking videos on TikTok. It was all just dance, like Gen Zers dancing
Hmm.
to things, lip syncing things. And so everybody's like, you're on TikTok? Like, what do you like? This was before it
Hmm.
was cool. And I just trusted that and was like, I'm just going to keep doing this because I feel like there's potential here. And I hit the wave at the right time and it exploded. I think I gained like 150,000 followers in like a month at one point, which is just
Wow.
outrageous. Um,
I think I have like 15 followers right now.
on TikTok.
150,000 followers. What was that like? Was it enjoyable or was it kind of like exhausting?
It wasn't exhausting. I think it just really fucked up my dopamine production
Yeah. Yeah.
because all of a sudden I was like, wow, this is like, it was a huge rush.
Yeah.
And then it dropped. Obviously, that's not like
Mhm.
sustainable. It just was like this wave because TikTok was also really pushing my profile on their explore page and stuff. Because it's just, I not a lot of other people were doing it at the time, and it became really popular, like mental health
Mhm.
content. Um, So then once it started dying down, I was like, no, I gotta go viral again,
Mm-hmm.
like an addict trying to get my next hit of
Mm-hmm.
virality. So that was hard on me, and it created some imposter syndrome because I'm like making mental health content, and like making health content was destroying my mental health.
Right.
And so that was weird.
Yeah.
So eventually I kind of burned out and started to like slow down from that. And I also got bored about just talking about that. It felt like if I talked about anything else, people didn't really care. And so it started to take a back seat, and I started to put more focus as things started to open up on like producing events and retreats and like the micro festival that you went to, and really wanting to gather with people. And that started opening up music again for me, where like creating music for these spaces and coming back to like group singing and sharing music as a healing modality started feeling really, really exciting. And in like meanwhile in all of this content creation phase, I had my own podcast that I produced for a season, and then I came on to a podcast called the Liturgists podcast,
Mm-hmm.
with my best friend Michael Gunger, and
Which
we
we've had Michael and Lisa on the
uh-huh
first season, and
yeah
maybe hope to have them on again. So yeah,
yeah
we're all good friends.
yes, so we did that for a bit. So yeah, I've done the podcasting thing for a minute now in different formats. And yeah, just at this point, really, my career has taken me all kinds of different crazy places within the film industry, the music industry, and the wellness world, and facilitating at retreats and leading workshops. And but I think the common thread in all of it is I am a producer at heart. Like I'm a creator at heart. I get these ideas and I want to bring them to life, whether it be a song or a short film or a
Mm-hmm.
poetry film or a podcast
Mm-hmm.
or a
Yeah.
workshop or a festival. Like I love creating, and I love creating things that bring people together and create connection and community and feel like medicine for how life can be really hard. It's been really hard for me. And like
Mm-hmm.
in my darkest times, certain music or a certain podcast episode that really made me feel seen, like all of these things have really been medicine for me. So there's
Mm-hmm.
something that is really nourishing for me to be that for
Mm-hmm.
someone else.
Yeah.
So that's kind of at the heart of
Yeah.
what I've been up to and why I'm here doing this.
I love it. So you've heard a little bit about Emily's story, about who she is, about her career, professional life. Sort of interested to ask one more question
Yeah.
to you to help the listener sort of understand more about you. What would be like one lighter, fun story that would get an insight into the weirdness, the levity, the idiosyncrasy of what it means to be Emily Capshaw in the world? Do you have anything like a recent memory that comes to mind?
Oh,
Like an embarrassing moment or like
I
a
don't.
re-
The thing that comes to mind, which I'm like, oh, this is just gonna go. I don't know if this is where you're leading me, but this is what's popping into my mind, and it's kind of classic me. And I feel like what you all discover me to be on this podcast is I'm not afraid to just expose myself and just go into the the places that are people like, what you did what now? So I'm gonna go there. But what's coming to my mind of just like a taste of what it is to be Emily right
Mm,
now is um the merging of like creating music and being in facilitating spaces and retreat spaces, and all of that has led me into some fun places recently. And one of them was, there's been two times now where I've collaborated with a friend of mine who does sort of like sexual healing tantric coaching and work, and she does retreats like that.
when I get that feeling, I need sexual healing.
Exactly, sexual healing.
Sexual healing.
uh
Okay, so
yeah.
two times in sexual healing
So two
spaces.
times in sexual healing spaces, I've now done live music for a self pleasure ritual where people are going through this kind of healing of erotic innocence, of feeling like it's safe to touch their bodies and like connect with themselves and be seen in that, and
Mm,
have that happen in a group space. And so yeah, there's been two times in the past year where I've been the one that's been hired to create a live soundscape to lead people into this erotic energy while they're just massaging their own bodies with coconut oil and like getting connected to their erotic energy. And it's been amazing.
Perfect.
And I'm like, great, this is like amazing, like dream career. Hello, this is awesome. So that's a little taste of like where I've been at and
If you
what it's like to be me. It's pretty great.
So if you guys need your sexual healing musician, hit up Emily
Yeah,
at
I'll
Emily Joy Capshaw
add
on
that to my
Instagram.
resume.
Exactly. It's amazing. Well,
Yeah.
hey, this has been a beautiful conversation to invite you guys into getting to know Emily, getting to know a little bit more this upcoming season that we're going to venture onto. We will begin the season where Emily and I will have some conversations, long form conversations, where we dive into various segments. We'll pick a topic. We'll pick sort of a direction for the conversation with all sorts of themes that include aspects related to the human experience, whether that's personal transformation, spirituality, pop culture, self awareness, love, or just something fun and funny. We'll dive into all sorts of conversations. And I think that what I'm excited about in this season of the podcast is the conversation, it's the community aspect. And I think those are things that we will double down on throughout the season. But just to give you guys a little sneak peek of the segments that we have coming along in the upcoming season of Soul Games, the podcast, the first segment is called Let's Get Personal. Let's get personal. 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 Let's get personal. Let's Get Personal is a segment built around telling our personal stories, like the one you just heard from Emily Capshaw about facilitating music at sexual healing workshops. And we'll just dive into all the crazy, weird, deep, fun stories around the subject matter, whether it's self-help stuff or all sorts of various things that we'll dive into to keep it fun throughout the season. And anything you want to say about that, Emily?
Yeah, we're gonna have some guests join us sometimes. Sometimes it'll just be the two of us. Sometimes we'll have a guest and we'll hear their personal stories as well. And one thing I'm excited about with the format of how we're doing all of this is it's less interview style and more just like shooting the shit conversations and really raw and vulnerable and just fun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I
Yeah.
feel the same. Beyond the personal stories, we'll dive into the second segment of each show, which is called Let's Get Social. And I'll play the music for that segment, which is produced by Emily Capshaw. Let's get social. Let's get social. Ooh, let's get social. It's actually been really fun just like bringing like my past musical career together with like your musical side and like the
Mm-hmm.
podcast side and the creator aspect and just kind of blending all of those things together. So we had a lot of fun putting these like little ditties together.
Mm-hmm. Super fun.
Oh man. So Let's Get Social is sort of a segment where we'll jump in the same line of the topic of whatever the show is for that day, that week, and it's internet stories. It's what's happening in the world. It's culture, cultural trends. It's TikToks, Instagrams. It's social media. What we'll share about what we see happening in the world, and it'll be times where we'll laugh and we'll be embarrassed and we'll just talk about. We'll get mad. We'll be like, "What is this?" So a little social commentary around the topic, and then the last segment that we have is called "Let's Get Deep." Let's get deep. Let's get deep. That is the lovely voice of Emily Capshaw. Let's Get Deep is sort of in the vein of what we've done in previous seasons, where I would end each episode with the 10 big spiritual questions of season 1 or season 2. But this is just one question where we'll either drop in and ask each other a question we come up with, a moment for a vulnerable moment of connection, or I'll pull a card from a card deck like we're not really strangers, and we'll sort of ask a question on the spot to connect at the end of the show. So You have any words about any of the segments and the upcoming season?
No, I think that pretty much nails it. It's going to be a good combination of personal stories and pop culture and vulnerability and lighthearted jokes about things and a little bit of everything. So it'll be a fun time.
So, just to ending this opening introduction episode of the first season of Soul Games, the podcast, I will, in the spirit of past seasons, draw a card and will give you guys a little sneak peek of the Let's Get Deep section. So this is sponsored by We're Not Really Strangers, which really isn't sponsored by them. It's just I pulled a card from their deck. And the question is to Emily Capshaw, what do you recommend I let go of, if anything? What do you recommend that I,
Oh,
Brady,
juicy, vulnerable.
let go
Okay.
of, if
How bad do I want
anything?
to roast you right now? Let's see. I
Oh,
already roasted you pretty good earlier.
damn. Damn. Be gentle.
What do I recommend that you let go of?
What do I need to let go of?
That's tough. The thing that's coming to my mind is I think there is a certain, in regards to like your joke earlier about like, oh, like this has, I'm still single even with my quote master skills or whatever. Like in regards to that, I think that there's been sometimes I've, in your conversations about that specific thing and looking for dating and looking for the right person, um that there's a level of, I don't know if it's insecurity because you don't strike me as insecure, but maybe being hard on yourself a bit about the way that that's gone down, or like the timeline of
Mm,
things, or creating maybe a story about yourself that you're not worthy or you're doing something wrong. Um and I think you could let go of that.
that sounds like a good thing to let go of.
Yeah.
I love that. Thank you.
Yeah.
A little vulnerable moment. I actually don't talk about relationship stuff very often on the
I know, that's what I
podcast.
was like, all right, how I'm gonna expose you. You asked for it. Maybe I'll pull that out of you this season for the listeners.
Uh-oh. Uh-oh.
Stay tuned while I get Brady to
Listen.
talk about his love life and
Hey.
embarrass him more. Look how red he's looking. If you're watching on the video, he looks red AF right now.
Here's the thing, just for the listeners, I know what it's like to have my private romantic world broadcasted all over the world in front of like 9 million people weekly
Of
on The
course.
Bachelorette. And I
Makes
think that
sense.
was just a really traumatic, it was really exciting, and like the dopamine rush thing that you talked about of like getting your 230,000 TikTok followers or whatever, like it was
Yeah.
amazing, but like it hit me so deep that I was like, oh, I'm gonna keep that secret forever.
Yeah. As soon as I said
um
dating, you looked like terrified. You're like, oh my God, where's she going to go with this?
Totally terrified, but hey, that is actually the beauty of like this segment and the beauty of this
But it was
season's
sweet. I
podcast.
was gentle. It wasn't
You were
anything,
gentle.
anything scary. It's just a sweet, loving thing of like, hey, Brady, you're worthy. Like, you're good enough.
No, that does feel really nice actually.
Yeah.
And like I that is something I can let go of, like the story around it. But I do definitely desire some companionship,
Mm-hmm.
and we'll see how that unfolds. Maybe
Maybe
this is
talking about it and exposing yourself in this podcast will be just the thing that will draw
maybe
in just the
maybe this
person.
podcast will be the secret weapon that I needed in
There you
my
go.
life.
I'm pretty good wingman.
Uh true. Okay, so I guess if I asked you the question, if I answered the question,
Mm-hmm.
what if anything do you need to let go of? This is such an interesting question. I feel like a hesitation, like I think maybe similar to what you felt. Like I'm like, "Ooh, what
Yeah,
who
it's
am I
scary.
to like offer some kind of advice to somebody of what they need to let go of?"
Yeah.
Um
Now I feel scared of what's gonna come for me. Now I'm in the hot seat. Be gentle to me too.
I think that what comes in the moment, I think your life is opening up in such an interesting way in this next season. I think a lot of what you have built kind of the last 5 years or around, it's kind of disbanded, and you're opening up to mystery and to the adventure of life and sort of what is unfolding as it's unfolding. I think it's like such a new beautiful way of being that previously you're letting go of and sort of transitioning into, which I think is really beautiful. um i I love that you like are like you're really tapping into your um like a new compass, sort of a new compass in your body about what it lights you up and what is your yes and what is your no.
You're really
um
cushioning this one, so it's probably gonna
no,
hurt.
no,
You're like,
I
let me
think
tell you all these great things first so it doesn't hurt so bad.
I think that my comment to you is more like I feel like you are letting go of an old way of life that wasn't serving you maybe as deeply as you thought, and you're kind of opening up to a newer life that I think is really life-giving. And if there's anything that you need to let go of, which I think my first answer would be like, no, you're good, you don't need to let go of anything. But if my second answer would be like, maybe just let go of just a tad the need for intensity to keep things exciting.
Mm,
um that there's a place where intensity can feel like connection,
mhm,
and sometimes it sort of keeps us in an old pattern that we're very familiar with. And I'm speaking from personal experience as well. So
mhm,
um yeah, maybe let go of just a little bit of the need for intensity and still see that maybe this moment, the experience of life is actually not boring when it
mm,
when it slows down a little bit. But
mm. I love that.
well, Emily
Challenge
Capshaw,
accepted.
I will accept your challenge as you'll accept mine. Hey, I'm really
Perfect.
excited. I'm excited to dive into this upcoming season with you. I feel honored that you are my co-host, and I feel a little afraid of all the things we're going to jump into that my mom is going to listen to throughout this
Sorry,
season.
Mom.
As sorry, Mom, as you push and evolve the conversation into places that we have yet to even go. So
I'm raising my eyebrows for those who aren't watching. I'm twisting my mustache in a
ooh,
sinister
that
way.
stash. Well,
It's time to talk about
I
sex, Brady. It's
it's time
time.
to talk about sex, baby. Let's talk about you and me.
Season
Let's
1,
talk about our.
spiritual masters. Season 2, well-being experts. Season 3, Emily talking about sex and making Brady feel really uncomfortable and turning red.
Blushing, blushing, blushing. Well, there you have it. We are embarking on a new journey. Hope you guys join us. Hope you stay tuned. Hope you subscribe, and I'm really looking forward to it. So great to be with you, and stay tuned for an incredible season of Soul Games, rebranded Soul Games, the podcast with Brady Toops and Emily Capshaw.
Bye, y'all. See you next time.
Bye. Hey, thanks for listening.
Yeah, thank you for spending some time with us.
If you want to find out more about what's happening with Soul Games, find us on Instagram at The Soul Games or go to thesoulgames.com.
Would love your help in rating and reviewing the podcast. And don't forget to subscribe to stay tuned to all future episodes.
Hey, and if you're loving these episodes and they make your life a little more beautiful, please consider signing up for the paid subscription of Soul Games, the podcast, or even donating through listener support.
Yeah, we'd love your support. All monthly subscribers will get access to bonus content, previous episodes, and be the first to know about exclusive upcoming opportunities to join in on the Soul Games community.
Yeah, we're really excited about the Soul Games community, where you'll have a chance to connect with myself, Emily, and others who are on a similar journey of exploring new ways to enjoy the game of life with a touch more soul.
Well, we appreciate you all so much. And as always, it's a pleasure to be with you.
We are your hosts, Brady Toops.
And Emily Capshaw.
Thanks for listening.
Yeah, thanks. Love you. Bye.
Soul Games, the podcast, is a production of Soul Games Media.